Hello, welcome back to the videos. This is our second video in that new series about playing in the key of D. And in the previous video, we looked at taking a melody. I think it was I Saw the Light, or I'll Fly Away. I think it was I'll Fly Away. And we moved it from the key of G to the key of D, just finding the melody notes as they fell across this D-shaped chord. And as I talked about in the previous video, there are more than one. There's more than one way. Get my mind working. There's more than one way to play in the key of D. Capoing up the 7th fret is one option. Tuning your banjo to D tuning, or playing out of D chord shapes and then using the other associated chords in the shape. So that's where we're at in the previous video. We were in that D shape and we found the melody, and I'm going to give you a close-up of the fingerboard. Hopefully, if I can stay in the camera shot here. We looked at the actual melody as it falls excuse me, in the shape, and we found that it was in the shape 1, 2, 3, 2, then 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then G, which is the next chord in the progression. The melody was a D note, the first string, second. So in this video, what we need to do is try to accompany the melody with some form of pattern, you know. And if we're talking about Scruggs style, primarily that's going to be rolls, and you build a solo in Scruggs style. And I actually did a set of videos called, I think it was called Building Solos in Scruggs style, where we kind of looked at, you know, taking a melody and adding rolls. But since we're concentrating solely on the key of D, let's see what we can do to enhance this melody. Now, one thing I like to tell my students is that rolls serve melody. Melody does not serve rolls, which means that when you're trying to construct a song solo-wise on your banjo, and you want the melody to be there and present and recognizable to the listener, it needs to be kind of put together like a vocal line. So we're primarily looking at vocal tunes here, not instrumentals. So if you're talking about some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away, those are the notes you need to keep intact. And yes, they can be syncopated a little bit, which means pushed off of the expected part of the beat. They don't always have to fall exactly on the beat that you expect them to be on, but they need to be in a rational order so that people can connect the dots in that melody and find it when they're listening to your playing. Now, a lot of people have issues with playing out of the D shape because it's not the most comfortable. This is where the frets are the widest and the neck the narrowest, you know, so they tend to complain about, well, my wrist angle is kind of a problem. So you'll have to work that out, and that's all just ergonomics, you know, just putting your fingers and your arms in a comfortable place. And then they also run into the question of, well, if the melody falls on the first string, I don't have any strings below it to roll over. So let's talk about rolling. The way I teach people to conceptualize how rolls serve melody is, once you find the melody note, you embed that note in a roll pattern so that the note doesn't get pushed too far off of the beat that's intended to be on. So we have, so if I were to start with the first string, now again the 5th string, like we talked about in the previous video, may sound out of place. So if we're playing in the key of D, down here positionally out of a D shape, it's probably a good idea to capo the 5th. That way you know it's always going to be kind of in close harmony with the chord. Okay. Now what I'm doing here is a roll pattern, and I'm going to try to get both hands in the camera shot here. I know it's hard to see what I'm doing here, but basically I'm just holding the D chord. So let's concentrate more on the right hand. And this is kind of a alternating thumb roll that's kind of been monkeyed around with a little bit. Now, of course, there are many options for rolls, but what I'm trying to get across here in the video is the melody notes are being placed just like I sing them. Somewhere in the morning. So again, the rolls are serving the melody. I'm not trying to You know, just come up with some, you know, eclectic sounding roll pattern, because even though that sounds nice, you know, it doesn't say some glad morning. So we need to construct some patterns that accommodate the structure of the melody. So in this case, try this pattern, just, you know, just for giggles here. Now what I'm doing is playing the first string as melody, some, and then I'm coming back to the 1 and 5 again. Now I'm dropping my index, then the third, and if you listen closely, I'm making these notes the stronger notes of the pattern. And you also detect them. Your brain is looking for these dots to connect, to figure out what is this that, you know, I'm playing. Alright, now we have this line, which is the end of the D section. Pinching or rolling. And again, no matter what you come up with, you don't have to always use rolls. That's why I use pinches in this example. You could roll, you could pinch, as long as you're representing the melody correctly. That's the goal. But since we're talking about rolls, let's see if we can come up with a roll pattern. What am I doing there? I'm doing an inside-out roll. 1, 2, 1, 5. 1, 2, 1, 5. Basically, is the pattern I'm choosing. So it's more of a 1, 2 finger pattern with the thumb added on the 5th. And I'm trying to make the notes last the proper duration. What does that mean? Well, some glad morning. They're like 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, and those would be quarter note melodies. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. But now, because I'm putting them in a roll pattern, they become 8th notes. And so the basic melody is quarter notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm chopping it in smaller bits to insert those notes into roll patterns. But the notes themselves still stand out as melody. And again, experiment with this. Try different roll patterns. You can do forward rolls, reverse rolls, backwards rolls, alternating thumb rolls that are a different form of this one. Pinches. And of course, you might say, well, Scruggs style is rolling, right? Well, it is roll based, but there are pinches. So you don't think that you have to roll continually through the whole song. You can put pinches in there. But now for the second phrase, when this life is over, we have this note. When this life is over, these two notes, over, they become stronger, longer notes. So we need to devise rolls. Notice that I hold this note out in a roll pattern longer than the other notes. And again, it's just, you know, a reverse roll, inside out roll, whatever you like to call it. Now we go to the G section of the song. I'll fly up. And we have a D note, and a B note, and a D note. I'll fly up. Those are the only notes that vocally you sing that are melody over the G chord. I'll fly up. And you hear the duration of the notes. I'll. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you have basically a dotted half note. It's 3 beats long. 1, 2, 3, 4 and. So we need to construct something roll-based that has the D string. Okay, now here's a quandary in Scruggs style that Earl fixed pretty easily. whenever you have the melody on the first string, you don't have any strings below the first to play. All the strings that you pick are above the first string. So when the melody falls on this string, open first, there's nowhere really to go below it to add anything, so you have to move above it. What Earl did was he would move notes like this over, and he would drone them. What does a drone mean? That means you play the two notes, the same notes on adjacent strings, basically. So this classic sound that you hear in bluegrass banjo of sliding or hammering from 2 to 3 on the second string and then playing the first string open underneath it, like Foggy Mountain. Of course, I got the fifth tuned to A, but anyway, this is the pattern. That pattern is a way to take a note that you would play on the first string as melody and move it to the second string. Why would you want to move it to the second string? Well, particularly for the key of D, G is the next chord in the song, and the melody will typically fall on the fifth note of the pattern, so a D note comes up quite often in G. So now that you're over a G chord, the first string is probably going to be a note you're going to need. But again, playing the first string, you could try to come up with a roll that has the first string in it. But hammering or sliding from 2 to 3 on the second string, is the same note as the first string open, and it's more forceful. And since you're above the first string now, you can use the first string as a drone. Now the problem we'll come into is in the key of D. Now your fifth string is tuned to A. Listen to this. Some people say, "Ooh, that A note is out of place." So they might, say, "Well, I don't want that fifth string capoed up to A." To me, it's not that offensive, but if you really hate it, you could come up with a roll pattern, say 3, 2, 1. I don't have a problem with the fifth string. Another option would be to leave the fifth string open. Now, it's not going to sound as great with D, but to me, it's a passing tone. Yes, this first string at 4 and in your D chord has dissonance with the fifth string open because they're a half step apart, G and F sharp. But as long as you're not doing this, which would be bad, as long as you're passing over notes, it's actually, to me, a pleasing sound. So typically when I play in the key of D like this, where I know I'm going to have to go to G a lot, which is your 4 chord, and I'm going to use the fifth string open for my roll patterns, I'll just leave the fifth open, and I'll hit the fifth string occasionally. And to me, as long as I'm not harping on that a lot, I get by with it. But of course, all this is up to you. I'm going to capo back to the A note, and I'm going to play what we have so far. Now this is the word "owl." There's your D note moved as a drone over here. And now you can hammer or slide. I'm just going to slide in this case. Now you need a B note. Fly. Well, that's easy enough. I'm just going to play fly as 2 notes. Remember, everything doesn't have to be a roll or some kind of fancy pattern. If you want to jazz it up, you could hammer the second fret of the second string, but again, that's not melody. Fly, be like a vocal inflection. Fly away. Alright, now you're back to this A note. Okay, the third string at 2 is in your chord. So you play that note and you have I'll fly a 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a whole note. In this next measure of D, all you have, if you're counting common time, is you have 1 note in that entire measure. So what would you do roll-wise? Well, any kind of roll that has that note embedded in it, but I would make sure, again, so that you line up the notes on the banjo with how you would sing it, the vocal phrasing, I would make sure I'd play that note right from the beginning of the measure. Even if you don't hit that note again in your roll pattern, make sure you hit it at the top of the measure. I'll fly away, because that's where the note comes in. It's the first melody note on the first beat of this new measure. What? I'll fly away. So I'm going to just play a roll pattern that has that A note as the first note. So let's go back to the previous measure. You notice I just played that note by itself and then went to kind of a backwards roll. But you can do, again, you can do any kind of rolls you want. You could even play this note more than one time. Way, you know, it's kind of stuttering the note. But the main thing is you play that note at the top of the measure, because that's where it comes in the count. I'll fly away, 2, 3, 4. So anytime that happens in a song and you're trying to render melody, make sure that that note is placed in the proper spot. Now you could syncopate it. I'll fly away. You could, you know, hold it out a little bit, or I'll fly away. I fly away. You could speed up a little bit, but those are syncopated tools to push that melody note slightly ahead of that first beat, or retard it a little bit and hold it back a little bit, whatever you want to do. But it still falls somewhere in the general vicinity of the first beat, because that's where you would sing it. So the syncopation allows you to play with it a little bit, move it around, but you can't push it too far out, because then I'll fly away, you know, you couldn't do that. You'd be too far out of balance. Alright, now we have the next measure. To a home on God's celestial shore, and then into the measure after that, and it's still D. All these are to a home on God's celestial shore. There's where the A chord comes in. So we got, you know, a couple of measures of D coming up, I think. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, like 2 measures and a half or something of D. And we can render the melody the same way, because even though this is a different vocal phrase, it's still the same melodic line. It still has the same notes in it. To a home on God's celestial shore. We already know how to handle that sequence of notes. But now we go back to I'll. Here's your half measure. If you're counting in 4, 1 and a 2 and a. That would be the first string at the 4th fret, and you'd have to hold that for, you know, half of a measure if you're counting 4 beats per measure, or a measure if you're counting cut time. Doesn't matter. But anyway, you got 2 beats to cover here. And again, I would try to play that note at the beginning of that first beat there, and if it gets syncopated, pushed around just a little bit, that's okay, but it needs to stay pretty well focused on the first beat of that 2-beat sequence of time there. I fly. Now in the chord of A, which is the 5 chord for this song, you have 2 options there. You could go to a bar chord position at 2 and play this E note, or you could go to this A chord and play this E note. Since we're trying to stay, you know, in a general location here, I'm going to just play the bar chord just for the heck of it. I'll fly. Anything you do over the A is going to sound good, especially when you're capoed up here with the 5th string, because that's an A note you're capoed to. So it's going to be in perfect harmony with this, because it's an A chord. And again, I would try to put that note in the proper sequence. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 1, 5, just for simplicity's sake. And that puts the first note, fly away. And when you play the D note, first string open, that is the last note of the verse. So we'll go, again, Scruggs style, we would move it over one string to give us a string under it to play. So I'm going to move the open D to this root note, because when you hold this D-shaped chord, this is also a D note, just like your open first. So you got I fly away. Now, that gives us a pretty nice sounding Scruggs constructed rolling solo that has primarily the melody placed in strategic spots in the beats of each measure, so that the melody notes fall in the right places, just like your vocal would. And Earl used to call that playing the words, but it's pretty smart, because what it's doing is it's telling you, use the vocal line when somebody sings it. Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away. That's the melody. It's telling you the notes, and it's also telling you the duration of the notes. How long should they last? So when you hit a long duration note, you form a longer roll pattern, making sure that that melody note gets played, you know, somewhere, if that were dead center of the beat, you know, you could be either right dead center on it, slightly behind it, slightly over it, but somewhere in real close proximity to that first beat. And then after that, you can hit it in any number of times you want to, because the listener's brain is going to try to connect the dots. So there's a basic rolling solo with melody in it. Now in the next video, what we need to do is add some ornaments to that, and maybe add some licks, because then you have to understand how to go to the next level. So the basic level is having the melody, figure out where it's at in relation to your chord shape. Done the chorus yet. The chorus only has a few notes different than the verses actually, but we'll do it at some point in another video. But in the next video, we will look at enhancing this rolling solo with a few ornaments, some tricks with the left hand like slides, hammers, pull-offs and things, and maybe even insert a lick or two, and we'll examine the function of a lick in a song like that, how it can be used effectively without disrupting the melody, and how licks can be used to substitute for melody in the key of D. And this will apply to any key on the banjo, but since we're focusing on D, we'll look specifically at D examples. And then in a future video, we may even move around the neck and try to play this melody in other places in D. But for right now, we'll stick with this D chord in the first few frets. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it's informational, instructional, all that jazz. And we'll see you in the next one.